What would you do if your HOA decided that your private land was now theirs? No notice, no permission, just construction crews showing up one morning, hammering stakes into your soil like they own the place. Sounds illegal, right? That's exactly what happened to me. But instead of fighting me, they handed me the ultimate weapon, their arrogance. And by the time they realized their mistake, I was already cashing a check for $7 million. Let me tell you how it all started. The morning air was crisp, the scent of damp earth rising as the sun broke through the trees. It should have been peaceful. But the moment I saw the movement down by my stream, my stomach twisted. A group of men in neon vests stood knee-deep in the water, unfurling measuring tapes, hammering stakes into the soft bank, their voices carrying over the quiet landscape. My grip tightened around my coffee mug, fingers pressing against the ceramic until my knuckles turned white. Something was very wrong. This was my land, my sanctuary. No one had any business being here. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I stepped off my porch and strode down the hill, boots grinding into the dirt. The woods that had always felt welcoming now seemed suffocating, the towering trees closing in as my anger mounted. "Excuse me," I called, my voice sharp as it cut through the sound of hammering. "What exactly do you think you're doing on my property?" One of the workers, middle-aged, sweat-stained, and visibly uncomfortable, hesitated before turning toward me. His eyes darted toward his colleagues as if silently debating how much to say. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Just following orders, sir." I stepped closer. "Whose orders?" "The HOA," he answered, as if that should explain everything. "They approved the bridge project last month." I froze. A bridge? No one had mentioned a bridge. No letters, no notices, nothing in my mailbox but the usual HOA nonsense about lawn maintenance and fence height restrictions. My blood turned to ice. "What bridge?" I snapped. "Nobody asked me about a bridge." The worker only shrugged, clearly eager to be anywhere else. "You'll have to take that up with Mrs. Langley. We're just doing our job." My stomach twisted at the name. Victoria Langley. The iron-fisted queen of Willow Creek Estates. She ruled over the HOA like a dictator, making decisions without consulting anyone who didn't fit into her pristine vision of suburban perfection. And if she was involved, this was bad. Very bad. Following the worker's nervous glance, I turned my gaze up the hill. There she was. Victoria Langley, in her signature red blazer and pearl necklace, clipboard in hand, overseeing the operation like a general commanding troops on a battlefield. The sight of her standing there, so calm, so assured, sent a fresh wave of fury through me. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a power play. And I was about to find out just how far Victoria was willing to go. I stormed up the hill, my boots grinding into the dirt with every step. My property deed was clenched tightly in my fist, the edges crumpling under the pressure of my grip. The closer I got, the clearer I could see Victoria Langley, her pearl necklace gleaming in the sunlight as she flipped through her clipboard with the smug assurance of someone who believed they were untouchable. Around her, a handful of HOA board members stood in quiet reverence, nodding along as she rattled off instructions to the workers. She barely spared me a glance as I approached, but her lips curled into a thin smile. "Ethan," she said smoothly, as if we were old friends catching up at a garden party instead of standing on my land while she orchestrated its invasion. "I was wondering when you'd come over." I held up my deed. "There must be some mistake. You can't build here without my permission." Victoria let out a dramatic sigh, flipping a page before finally meeting my gaze. "The board voted unanimously last month. This connecting bridge will improve community access to the park and increase property values." She lifted an eyebrow. "The notice was in the newsletter." I inhaled sharply, my pulse hammering. "I never received any notice," I said through gritted teeth. And more importantly, you're building on my land. Without my consent. That's illegal, Victoria. Her smile widened, condescending, dismissive. Don't be dramatic, Ethan. It's just a small footbridge. Why would you stand in the way of community progress? She waved a hand as if brushing aside my concerns like an irritating mosquito. Besides, the stream falls under our easement rights. No, I said firmly, shaking my head. It absolutely does not. I have the survey right here. I extended my property documents toward her, but she didn't even glance at them. We've already allocated the funds, she said, returning her attention to her clipboard. Construction starts tomorrow morning. I clenched my jaw, every muscle in my body coiled tight. Around us, a few neighbors had gathered, drawn by the confrontation. But when I turned to meet their eyes, they quickly looked away. Cowards. No one wanted to be on the wrong side of Victoria Langley. By the time I stepped back into my house, my hands were shaking with fury. I tossed my property deed onto the kitchen table and began pacing, my mind racing. Victoria had dismissed me like I was nothing, a child throwing a tantrum. But this wasn't over. Not even close. I grabbed my phone and dialed Lauren Bishop. She picked up on the second ring, her voice groggy from sleep. Ethan? I need your help, I said, barely keeping the edge out of my voice. The HOA is building a bridge on my land without my permission. There was a pause. Then, in that quiet, steel-edged tone she reserved for legal battles, she said, "Tell me everything." I laid it all out, the survey stakes, Victoria's smug dismissal, the fake claim about easement rights. Lauren listened in silence, and when I finished, she exhaled. They can't do that. If your deed shows you own the land up to the stream, they need your consent. Period. Relief flickered in my chest, but it was quickly overshadowed by a growing sense of unease. HOA rules were one thing. Legal property rights were another. And Victoria Langley had acted like she was untouchable. The next morning, I was up before dawn, standing by my window with a cup of coffee, waiting. Watching. At exactly 6:30 a.m., the rumble of heavy machinery shattered the stillness. I bolted out the door and down the hill, my stomach twisting at what I saw. An excavator sat at the edge of my property, its massive claw digging deep into the soft earth beside my stream. Workers moved with quiet efficiency, hammering posts into the ground. The foundation for the bridge was already taking shape. And standing off to the side, overseeing everything with a satisfied smirk, was Victoria. I didn't hesitate. I strode toward the workers, my pulse hammering. Stop! You're trespassing. The foreman, a burly man with sun-weathered skin, turned toward me. His expression flickered with discomfort, but he didn't stop the crew. Sir, we have authorization from the HOA. We're just following orders. I pulled out the cease and desist letter Lauren had drafted, shoving it toward him. This is a legal notice. You do not have authorization. You are violating private property laws. The man barely glanced at the paper. Take it up with the HOA. My fists clenched. This is my land. I don't need to take it up with anyone. Victoria finally stepped forward, sighing as if I were some petulant child. Oh, Ethan, you're making such a fuss over a little bridge. This isn't your land, I shot back. And according to my survey, you're not just trespassing. You're building 12 feet further into my property than you think. For the first time, her smug expression faltered. I held her gaze, my voice deadly calm. You want to play games, Victoria? Fine. But you just made the biggest mistake of your life. That night, I barely slept. As I sat at my kitchen table, poring over research and legal codes, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about a bridge anymore. This was war. The night was thick with silence, the kind that settles just before a storm. I sat at my kitchen table, my laptop open, documents spread across every available surface. Property records, survey maps, cease and desist letters, all evidence of the war I was now fully engaged in. But I needed more than paperwork. Victoria Langley didn't respect laws, only power. I had to find a way to hit her where it hurt. My phone buzzed, the unknown number flashing on the screen. I hesitated for only a second before answering. "Mr. Carter," a smooth, businesslike voice said. "I hear you're having trouble with an HOA. Who's asking?" I leaned back in my chair, wary. "Jonathan Hale. Riverside Development. I've been following your situation." A brief pause, then the bombshell, "That bridge they're building? It might be worth millions, but only if you let them finish it." I sat up straighter. "Explain." Hale didn't waste time. "Your neighborhood sits on a key missing link in the Pine Valley Greenway project. The township's been trying to connect their trail system for years, but the problem? No legal access. That bridge solves it, but only if the HOA owns the land it's on." I exhaled slowly, the pieces falling into place. "So if I refuse to grant access?" "They're screwed," Hale confirmed. "They built something valuable and handed you total leverage." The shift in power was instant. I wasn't just fighting back anymore, I was holding all the cards. The next morning, construction had accelerated. Crews were hammering away, pouring concrete, racing to finish before I could legally stop them. Victoria stood nearby, overseeing it all with her usual smug satisfaction. I strolled down the hill, hands in my pockets, watching her for a long moment before speaking. "Morning, Victoria," I called out, my tone almost too pleasant. She turned, her smile forced. "Ethan." I nodded toward the bridge. "Coming along fast. You must be proud." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What are you up to?" I chuckled. "Oh, nothing. Just wondering, did you get federal permission from the Army Corps of Engineers? This waterway falls under their jurisdiction, doesn't it?" The HOA treasurer visibly paled. Victoria's lips thinned. "That wasn't necessary." I shrugged. "Might want to double-check that before making such a claim." The flicker of doubt in her expression was all I needed. I turned and walked away, whistling to myself. That evening, I buried myself in research, looking for every possible legal violation Victoria had committed. And I found plenty. The Army Corps of Engineers had strict regulations about construction near protected streams. The environmental paperwork the HOA had filed? It didn't exist. I emailed the evidence to the county inspector. The next morning, I reviewed the footage from my newly installed security cameras. What I saw made my blood run cold. Victoria was leading a private HOA meeting on my land. She stood in front of the half-built bridge, speaking to a small group of HOA members, gesturing grandly as if she owned the place. I couldn't hear her words, but I didn't need to. The message was clear. She was desperately trying to maintain control. But she was already losing. That afternoon, I made a few calls. Within hours, the county environmental officer, the zoning commission, and a local journalist were all very interested in the situation unfolding in Willow Creek Estates. Victoria just didn't know it yet. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the game had already changed. I just had to let Victoria Langley realize it the hard way. The first sign of trouble came at 8:15 a.m. when a county inspector, clipboard in hand, expression unreadable, stepped onto my property, flanked by two environmental officers. The construction crew stopped mid-task as he approached, and I watched from my porch, sipping my coffee, waiting for the moment the truth would land. Victoria arrived minutes later, power walking down the hill, her red blazer a little too crisp, her usual self-assurance a little too forced. She greeted the inspector with a smile, her voice smooth as ever. "There seems to be some confusion," she said, folding her hands neatly in front of her. "This bridge was fully approved by the HOA." The inspector didn't blink. "I'm not here about the HOA's approval, ma'am. I'm here because this construction violates county and federal environmental laws." For the first time, her mask cracked. "That's impossible. We reviewed everything." "Oh?" The inspector flipped through his paperwork. "Because according to the Army Corps of Engineers, you never filed for the required permits. And under county code, disturbing a protected waterway without authorization carries a fine of $10,000 per day, per violation." I could hear the air leave Victoria's lungs. And just like that, the bridge went from a symbol of her power to a financial time bomb waiting to explode. The HOA treasurer's face turned ghost white. "Wait, what?" he stammered, looking at Victoria. "You said we didn't need." Victoria shot him a sharp look, but it was too late. The inspector had already heard enough. He handed her an official stop work order. "Effective immediately," he said, "this project is shut down. Further construction will result in legal action." I couldn't have written a better script. Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it again. For once, she had nothing to say. By that evening, word had spread through the neighborhood. The HOA board was scrambling, homeowners were whispering, and Victoria was running out of moves. That's when I received the next surprise. At exactly 9:42 p.m., my doorbell rang. When I opened it, Victoria was standing there. Alone. She had never looked so unpolished. Her pearl necklace was slightly askew, and the faintest shadows darkened her usually flawless face. She was trying desperately to hold on to the image of control, but I could see the edges fraying. "We need to talk," she said, voice clipped. I leaned against the doorframe. "Do we?" Her jaw tightened. "The HOA board has considered your situation. We're offering you a settlement." She handed me a folder. Inside was a contract offering $25,000 for a permanent easement. I laughed, actually laughed. Victoria's lips thinned. "This is more than fair." "For who?" I asked, stepping closer. "Because Pine Valley Township is offering me $7 million. The color drained from her face. "That's absurd," she said quickly. "No easement is worth that much." I tilted my head. "Then why are you so desperate?" Her fingers curled into fists. "We won't be extorted." "No, Victoria," I said, voice calm. "You won't be in power much longer." She knew it. And for the first time, she was afraid. The morning of the so-called bridge grand opening arrived bright and clear, but instead of celebration, I was watching the slow-motion implosion of Victoria Langley's empire. From my porch, I could see the gathering on my land, neighbors in their finest, HOA board members lined up like royalty, and at the center of it all, Victoria in her signature red blazer, gripping a pair of oversized ceremonial scissors. She held a champagne flute in the other hand, her smile just a little too tight, her laugh just a little too forced. It was time. I grabbed my phone, hit record, and walked toward them. The second they spotted me, the conversation stopped. The hum of polite laughter vanished. I smiled. "What a lovely surprise," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "Didn't realize I was hosting a party on my private property." A few neighbors shifted uncomfortably. Victoria's smile didn't falter, but I could see the muscles in her jaw tighten. "Ethan," she said sweetly, "we're just here to celebrate progress. You should join us. After all, this bridge benefits everyone." I tilted my head. "Did you also tell them about the federal violations? The environmental fines? The fact that this entire project was illegal from the start?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Victoria's mask was slipping. This is just more of your... I turned my phone slightly, making sure my recording captured the stunned faces around us. I hope your board has a plan to cover those fines, I said lightly. Because I doubt any of you are prepared for a special assessment of, what was it? Over $100,000 per household? Now they were angry. At her. Homeowners who had been all smiles moments ago were now backing away, whispering, realizing they'd been used. The HOA treasurer looked like he was seconds from throwing up. And just like that, Victoria Langley was finished. By noon, the HOA board had collapsed. By evening, Victoria had resigned. And by the next week, I had signed the deal with Pine Valley Township. $7 million. That's how much her arrogance had made me. As I sat on the balcony of my new beachfront condo, sipping coffee and listening to the ocean, my phone buzzed. A new number. A new HOA nightmare. A woman's voice greeted me. Mr. Carter, we heard about what you did. We need your help. I smirked. Tell me everything. So, have you ever fought back against a power-hungry HOA? Or did you let them walk all over you? Drop your worst HOA horror story in the comments below. Let's see who had it worse.